Alofa Day and welcome to our special presentation of our Flight of the Sihek series. I'm Tomas Manglona reporting on Saipan at the Bird Island Lookout, where the environment here is not that much different from where 9 Guam Kingfishers have been released on Palmyra Atoll. Throughout this show, we'll bring you along the journey as history is made for the Guam Sihek. Our first story begins on Guam. The last wild sighting of the Guam Sihek was in 1988. Only 141 Guam Sihek are left in the world, all under human care. There are just 45 breeding females left, but that could change soon. Suzanne Medina is a Sihek recovery biologist with the Guam Department of Agriculture.
We have a chick rearing facility at the Kansas Zoo, at the Sedgwick County Zoo, and so the zoos throughout the U.S. are sending chicks and eggs to Kansas for hand rearing for eventual release on Palmyra Atoll.
That release of 9 birds is expected at the end of the month. It is long awaited, a chance for Guam's next generation to experience the once thriving wildlife. Mikumi Joseph is a biology student at the University of Guam interning with DOA.
When I go outside, I don't hear birds. I can hear the pigeons or the sparrows, but other than that, I have never seen any of other Guam's native birds, and more than half of them have went extinct before I was even born. So whatever is affecting these birds, and then just in general Guam's native flora and fauna, it would affect us too.
Yolanda Topasnia could also be part of the team at the historic release. Like for many locals on the job, the progress is also personal.
My dad, who's 87, saw his last bird sighting back in 1952 on NAS, when it was NAS in season, and it was a honey eater from his description. Red bird, he described it to a T, and he remembers it vividly. So hopefully one day that can be something our children and my grandchildren can experience later.
It's really important to have our community involved, and so having our young people involved is super exciting for us, and we're hoping to get as many people as possible from our home to Palmyra to see the birds, so they can bring back the message of our Sihek flying in the wild.
And now the story brings us to Wichita, Kansas, where we visited last year as the Sihek Recovery Project renewed its efforts to return the Guam Sihek into the wild. We meet some of the members of the international team who are part of this journey. The sounds of Palmyra Atoll play over a computer speaker at the Sihek Recovery Project biosecurity facility in Wichita, Kansas. 9 Guam Sihek at the Sedgwick County Zoo will hopefully hear those sounds daily when they're released on Palmyra later this week.
Once the birds have been introduced to the island, they're used to these sounds and different noises of different wildlife.
KUAM returned to Kansas after a year as an exciting new phase unfolds for the bird, which is extinct in the wild. Before the 14-hour journey to Palmyra from Kansas, we joined Camille Munday and Antonia Fitchett from the ZSL London Zoo, who have brought their expertise to care for the birds for weeks, cleaning their cages, giving them medicine, feeding them, and observing their every move before they take flight.
At the moment they're on an ad-lib diet, so we're feeding them what they want so that they're very nice and full and ready for the island.
That diet includes crickets, worms, lizards, and mice. They've trained them to know food is ready by blowing a whistle, a practice they hope to use in Palmyra to call the birds back to monitor them. The birds, 4 females and 5 males, came from zoos across the nation: Cincinnati Zoo, National Aviary in Pittsburgh, Disney's Animal Kingdom, Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, and Sedgwick County Zoo. Each of the birds has a Chamorro name selected by KUAM viewers on social media and reflects their personality.
You have some that are really shy, you have some that are really playful, some that are quite hyperactive, others are a bit more sleepy, but we can tell them apart, the people that work with them all the time. We're able to tell them apart because every individual has unique personalities, which is really lovely to see.
Kansas has served as a hub for the Sihek's recovery, connecting a network of zoos and people invested in seeing the Sihek thrive.
So we're really hopeful that the Sihek will establish a really nice population out here on Palmyra Atoll. We're hoping that we'll get enough breeding pairs, and it's going to be really exciting if we do manage to get these species to Guam itself.
To see our birds on their way to be in the wild is really special. The Sihek hasn't been there in the wild since the 80s.
Diane Weiss with the Guam Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources will be on the flight to Palmyra with the 9 Guam Sihek, which will be released there this week. In her over 2 decades on the job, she's seen the cocoa bird and Mariana crow return to the wild, and now a historic moment for another Guam native forest bird.
You can work in conservation for many years and never actually see something done, and I feel really fortunate to be involved in such a great groundbreaking work that we do in Guam.
That work is especially delicate, leading up to a 14-hour journey on a chartered flight from Kansas to Palmyra. That includes making sure they're healthy. Sedgwick County Zoo Director of Animal Health, Heather Ahrens, will be on the flight.
The project itself is such a big project and kind of a lot weighing on it that these birds get a little bit extra attention as far as veterinary care, making sure that they're healthy, because we don't want to introduce any pathogens to Palmyra, create problems for other species on the island. So there's a lot of pressure to make sure that they are healthy moving forward and that we are actually sending out the healthiest birds we possibly can.
Erica Royer with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute continues to prepare for the trip. No detail is too small. The birds will be transported safely in these bags, adorned with drawings from a kids' camp at Disney's Animal Kingdom, where some of the Sihek came from. Royer will be spending 5 weeks on Palmyra. She explains what will happen when we land.
Take them straight to their aviaries. There are 3 different aviaries, and there'll be 3 birds in each one. We'll give them some sub-Q fluids just to help them out and get settled in their new environment. Release them in their aviaries and then start feeding them from there. And then in the morning, monitor them closely first thing in the morning and help them to get situated in their new environment.
And as all eyes are set on Palmyra, the future points to a hopeful return to Guam.
There is hope that we could protect the nest, and then if the birds can get out there and exist with the snakes at a low density, that could definitely in the near future.
Don't go away. We'll have more of our Flight of the Sihek series right after this. Welcome back to our Flight of the Sihek series. I'm Tomas Manglona. One of the major questions we got along our reporting trip was why Wichita? Well, we learn why in this next story and meet those at the Sedgwick County Zoo who play a vital role.
We have had a flurry of activity over the last 2 or 3 weeks as we get ready for this kind of momentous flight.
We're a day away from the highly anticipated release of 9 Guam Sihek on Palmyra Atoll. The entire team at the Sedgwick County Zoo, where the birds are under quarantine, has seen the ups and downs of the project since it was delayed last year after there weren't enough birds. Scott Newland is the president and CEO of the zoo.
The birds still didn't read the manual, and it has been a pretty protracted breeding season. But the good news is we've had a lot more egg laying. We've had a lot better success transporting the eggs to Wichita or transporting chicks the day after they hatched here.
Ann Heitman is the curator of birds who has overseen some of the logistics of the project locally.
Are naturally now the hub of the chick rearing part. So we've gotten to participate a little bit in helping raise the chicks, but really we're more a logistical side and making sure that they have supplies that they need, the food. Our commissary staff, our vet med staff have been really integral in making sure they have everything they need. The bird staff are helping out with different supplies and things that they need in the trailer.
Birdkeeper Travis Ewer went to Palmyra for a week last year to help prepare the aviaries for the Sihek's arrival.
So all we had to do was gather up all of our supplies that had been shipped out there, and then we just spent a week just setting up the cages and everything. It was an interesting challenge dealing with the weather on Palmyra. It gets a lot of rain.
The team remains hard at work to one day help the Sihek return to Guam.
For the people of Guam, thank you for trusting us with your birds and being part of this project to continue moving the species forward.
And now to the moment many have been waiting for. The Sihek finally board the plane and make their way to their new home on Palmyra Atoll. Here's more. Half a day, we're not in Kansas anymore. We've officially taken off from Wichita with the 9 Guam Sihek, which will be released on Palmyra Atoll in the coming days. And we're joined with a familiar face in our Flight of the Sihek series, Erica Royer, an aviculturist. Erica, tell us a little bit about the preparation that went into this morning to secure these really special birds.
Yeah, so we got up really early to offer the birds some food so they would get a chance to eat before we left, because they're probably not going to eat in transport. We had our vet team come and give them some fluids, like we saw earlier, and then they were weighed and checked over to make sure they look healthy. We put them in their butterfly habitats, which are inside these backpacks to keep them mosquito-proof during the journey. And then there are 2 birds in the bottom of all these backpacks and 1 on the top, all of which are labeled. We've got a thermometer here to make sure the cabin is a good temperature for the birds, and we'll just keep a close eye on them throughout. We can see the birds through this mesh here, but it still keeps it a little bit dark for the birds to keep them calm.
And we have 2 stopovers on this flight before we make it to Palmyra Atoll, the first in California and the second in Honolulu. And there are also teams on standby there, I understand, right?
Correct, yeah. So for these kinds of transports or any animal transport, you should always have contingency plans. So there are zoos waiting to hear from us in California and in Honolulu to make sure we don't need anything, if there are any veterinary emergencies, or if we need any additional food while we're in travel. They are on standby waiting to hear from us and ready to help if needed.
And the word today and all of our viewers online is excitement. There's a lot of excitement, and I know that so much hard work went into this. We're finally off the ground. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, it's pretty special. There really aren't even words for it. We made an attempt last year to do the translocation and didn't get enough chicks, and of course that was disappointing at the time, but that really allowed us to prepare for this year. So just very excited to be here off the ground and eager to get the birds into their aviaries in Palmyra. It's a very special experience. I feel very lucky.
All right, thank you so much, and we'll have more from the air and on the ground when we reach Palmyra. Welcome back to the show. Now to the moment many have been waiting for. The 9 Guam Sihek arrive on Palmyra Atoll. It's a new dawn. A new day for the Guam Sihek. We landed on Cooper Island in Palmyra Atoll after a 14-hour journey from Wichita, Kansas. The Nature Conservancy, which owns the island, held signs along the runway welcoming the Sihek.
They must feel at home here if they're already eating the minute they get here. It was a long journey for them, so it's definitely surprising that they ate, but they must feel like this is home.
The birds were placed in temporary tents overnight. On Friday morning, history was made. The Guam Sihek were released, one by one, into aviaries spread across the island before their eventual release into the wild.
The release isn't happening today. We just put them in their release aviaries, and then we will give them probably about a week at least to kind of get settled, get used to the environment, make sure they're eating, and then make sure they're eating live food. They need to learn, or at least we need to make sure that they're dispatching their own live prey that's crawling in and out of the aviaries. Once we know that they're doing that, they'll get a quick health exam, and then we'll attach backpack transmitters to them. As soon as they're settled after that, then we can go ahead and open the doors, and that could be different days for different individuals. So we're definitely just taking it at whatever pace the birds tell us they're ready.
KUAM News had the opportunity to release the last of the 9 birds into the aviary. It was an emotional moment for everyone involved, working on the project for years.
I feel very emotional that, these birds are are coming to a place that's just like their home. It's very much like Guam here. And this is the next step towards coming home to Guam.
It's an emotional moment for me. It's something that's been years in the works, only possible because, you know, Palmyra poses such a low risk to these birds. It's such a well-studied ecosystem, so we were able to bring them here responsibly and ensure their safety. It's a very important step towards seeing them return to Guam finally.
And yeah, it's just a really happy occasion, even though I'm crying. And yeah, I just have so much hope for these individuals and then for the species as a whole.
And the birds will now settle into their new home.
They seem to be acclimating really well to their new habitats.
A new habitat that they once thrived in.
The Sihek will have so many other bird friends here. Just to be in the wild like they were born to be.
Now, we just spent a little over 24 hours on Palmyra, but it wasn't until September when the release finally happened. Here's that update. Over the weekend, the Guam Sihek returned to the wild for the first time since the 1980s. The Sihek was released on Palmyra Atoll on Saturday, Guam time. The first bird to take flight is named Mamis, meaning sweet in Chamorro, a male bird making a swift exit from its aviary into its new home, sweet home.
It was a pretty special experience to see them go. Certainly after seeing Sihek in captivity for many years, working with them, it didn't seem quite real. Like looking through the binoculars, it seemed like I was watching a movie or something. But yeah, it was definitely an emotional experience.
The doors of each aviary were opened one by one. The second release of another 3 birds happened on Sunday. The third release of the final group of 3 Sihek was delayed to later this week due to heavy rain.
Some were ready to go right away, others were a little more hesitant and needed a little bit of time to poke their head out of the release hatch and scope things out before they were ready to take that first flight. We have already started tracking. That is going well, albeit challenging because they have discovered that the trees are much higher perches than they've been used to. So they're having quite a good time, 40 to 50 feet up in the canopy.
They all showed their individual behaviors and kind of how they came out of the aviaries a little bit, and then showed their infamous aggression. So they started chasing each other around immediately.
The aviaries will remain open and food and water will be provided in case they return to them. The release was years in the making, starting with efforts on Guam through the decades to save the Sihek. The team will continue to monitor them in the weeks and hopefully years to come before they can hopefully return to the wild on Guam.
So now that the birds are released, we are hoping that they will quickly establish territories and hopefully they will pair up, so males and females together in breeding pairs, and they will defend that little area from other pairs. And once they do that, generally they'll stick right in that area, and that will make it a lot easier for us to then go and find them because we'll be following them so closely. We'll be able to really neatly map out those territory lines.
Don't go away, we'll have more Sihek stories right after this. Welcome back to the show. I'm Tomas Manglona reporting. In our next story, we speak with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Honolulu during our layover on our way back to the Marianas. We learn about what role they played and catch up with one Guam Olympian. 9 Guam Sihek are settling into their new home on the Nature Conservancy's Preserve and Research Station on Palmyra Atoll. They're weeks away from leaving their aviaries. On KUAM's trip home from Palmyra, we met wildlife refuge specialist Raina Taitingfong, who's from Guam in Hawaii.
As a biologist and as a Chamorro woman and someone that grew up on Guam not hearing birds, I mean, we're right here in Waikiki and that's all you hear. You know, people don't realize that when you grow up on Guam, you don't hear these things.
She hopes the birds can sing again on Guam. She was a biologist at the Guam Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources and participated in early conversations about the Sihek's recovery. The Olympian described supporting the international effort as a full circle moment.
Yeah, I'm an Olympian, but this is actually really cool. Like, that's cool to represent my island, and then I get to come here and be with my career and representing my island species. So I'm really lucky and I'm blessed.
Now all eyes are on the Sihek's behavior in the aviaries ahead of their hopeful wild release.
We're really interested to see how they're going to behave, what they're going to eat, how they interact with each other, how they interact with other creatures and wildlife around them, and all that information. There's people paid to be down there to just watch these birds, and they're going to gather all that information, and all of it's going to help us to learn, once Guam's ready, like how can we be the most successful in releasing the birds back on Guam.
On Palmyra, we spoke to the recovery program manager with the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office, Megan Lott, who reflected on the journey.
We've been working for so long to bring these birds to Palmyra and to have these birds in the wild again, and I'm on Palmyra, the birds are on Palmyra. It's just really hard to believe, but it's real.
Now the future points to returning those birds to the wild on Guam.
Hopefully 10 years from now, maybe, who knows, we'll start hearing birds again.
There's no doubt that the Guam Sihek's return to the wild after nearly 40 years has inspired countless people. One of them, a Guam educator and artist who's giving back with the hopes of one day seeing the Guam Sihek back on Guam, its native land. Guam educator and artist Frank Candaso is doing his part at home to support the Guam Sihek Recovery Project, as 9 Guam Sihek now live in the wild on Palmyra Atoll.
Because the Sihek has been really a focal point in a lot of the art and designs that I've done, it was important for me to provide an avenue for the community really to participate in this event because it's so historic, right? We haven't seen the Sihek in the wild in almost 40 years.
He's working with the Sihek Recovery Project, selling products online with his design of the Sihek inspired by their recent release.
My website is called King and Rail, and the name came from the Guam Kingfisher and then the Guam Rail. So I put those together. So those two, because the birds are specific to Guam, it's very important. It was important for me to really promote the culture in that way.
The funds will directly benefit the efforts, with a portion of the sales donated to a nonprofit. Thank you so much for joining us on this special presentation of our Flight of the Sihek series. There is definitely more to come as we continue to track the progress of our Guam Kingfisher. We want to thank our partners at the Zoological Society of London, or ZSL, for making this reporting possible. You can continue to track updates at kuam.com, and we'll see you next time as our Flight of the Sihek series continues.